Welcome to Bonus Bookworms. I'm your host, Joe, and with me today is our special guest, Becky.
Woohoo!
How you doing, Becky?
I'm here.
You are here. Aren't we glad to have you?
Are you, though? You're already testing me.
Always. How am I testing you?
What are you going to talk about?
So, today's bonus book is a kind of a spur-of-the-moment book, to be honest. I didn't actually take any notes, so we'll see how this goes.
Oh my gosh. The world is going to crumble and fall. That would
Pretty
be
much.
10,000 years. 10,000 miles. Sorry, 10,000 miles. Or is it years? I forget. Robert Burns, help me out. You don't even know the poem, so don't shake your head at me.
I've heard of the poem.
Congrats.
So, earlier, this was last month now, or a couple months from when you guys will be listening to this, I was reading a book, and everyone that saw me reading this book is like, oh, that's a really good book. I'm like, okay, great. And they would say, oh, I don't want to spoil it for you. I'm like, I already know the story because I listen to podcasts and YouTube videos and
you went to school.
And this is a fairly famous explorer because it is a true story, I guess. This is what would you call this? Not really a biography, but
Well, I haven't read it, so I don't know. But if you open it up to the copyright page, it might have a hint as to what it is.
You're so smart.
I know.
Where would it say on this?
Usually towards the bottom in all of the gobbledygook stuff. Usually in brackets.
It does not say.
Oh, okay.
It has a bunch of other stuff.
Cool.
But does not. Anyways, so I guess we're gilding the lily enough here.
What?
Mixing metaphors for you.
Oh my gosh, it is too late for this.
So the book that I was reading is called Endurance by Alfred Lansing. And this book is the telling of Shackleton's final voyage to Antarctica and his harrowing experience trying to get out of there. Becky's just staring at me like I'm an idiot.
I'm sorry. I'm very much in this whole like Jurassic Park mindset because people keep doing things that they're like, oh, I want to see if I can do this. Instead of being like, should I do this? And this is like a prime example. Like, yes, it's a person who's of sound mind when they're like, I'm going to go to an ice field and see if I can circumnavigate whatever.
The goal was to cross the South Pole and go to the other side of the continent.
Again, why?
To be the first.
Gold.
The British wanted to be the first to claim to do this.
Well, the British are a whole thing unto
how many,
themselves.
in today's money, billions of dollars did the British spend trying to send exploratory ships out to find new pathways and scientific discoveries, only to lose like half their ships?
Again, why? It's cold. It's
Some
so
of us
cold.
enjoy the cold.
That was not a cold you're going to enjoy.
Okay, so here's what the back says. In August 1914, polar explorer Ernest Shackleton boarded the Endurance and set sail for Antarctica, where he planned to cross the last uncharted continent on foot. In January 1915, after battling its way through 1,000 miles of pack ice and only a day's sail short of its destination, the Endurance became locked in an island of ice. Thus began the legendary ordeal of Shackleton and his crew of 27 men. For 10 months, the ice-moored Endurance drifted northwest before it was finally crushed between two ice floes. With no options left, Shackleton and a skeleton crew attempted a near-impossible journey of over 850 miles of the South Atlantic's heaviest seas to the closest outpost of civilization. Their survival and the survival of the men they left behind depended on their small lifeboat successfully finding the island of South Georgia, a tiny dot of land in a vast and hostile ocean. In Endurance, the definitive account of Ernest Shackleton's fateful trip, Alfred Lansing brilliantly narrates the harrowing and miraculous voyage that has defined heroism for the modern age.
I still can't. What?
Are you impressed yet?
No.
Why not?
It's pretty cool that they did find the ship.
What do you mean they found the ship?
Oh my God, where have you been? Like, it was big news. Months ago, they found the Endurance.
Did they? It was literally crushed.
They found it. Where have you been?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, all of these podcasts. And you did not hear about, oh my gosh.
Well, I am sorry I'm not up to date on the news.
Okay, it was found in 2022, so it's been a few years. Where have you been?
Well, you made it sound like it was like 2 months ago while I
Well-
was reading this book.
Well, I have very horrible time issues, as you are aware.
You don't say.
You can go visit the ship if you want.
Okay. I hear it's quite lovely this time of year down there.
No, it's actually not right now. It's getting colder.
I know. Sounds like ski weather to me.
I don't know if you want to go skiing there.
Anyways. There have been quite a few books written about Shackleton, obviously, because he's probably one of the most recognizable names to our modern audiences. For this specific voyage, there's two, I guess you could call them primary accounts or near primary accounts. There's a Shackleton version where he gilds the lily, I guess you could say. He makes it sound like a Greek epic almost.
Oh, is he Odysseus?
Pretty much.
Yuck.
And very, very liberal with the language and loose with the facts. Where Alfred Lansing, who became interested in this, I believe it was in the 30s and 40s, actually went to England and interviewed the surviving members of the crew, got a lot of their diaries put together, and he tried to put down a straightforward, no frills story that was as close to fact as possible and not making anyone else to be heroes, just doing what they needed to do to survive. And that's what kind of made this book the definitive book for this journey, where everyone kind of looks at this book. And it's kind of a sad story because the author, when he first got it published, I believe in the 50s, the book kind of just went unnoticed. Nobody cared. And he tried for decades to try to sell this book and get this book out there because he thought it was that important, until he eventually passed away. And it was like within several years of him passing away, the book became the mega hit that he knew it should have been. And yeah, way it usually goes for authors, I guess.
Hint, hint.
Always if you're a good author, you're not going to be recognized till after you're dead. Let's just face it.
Chin up, Alex.
Yeah, buy Alex's books. The link will be in the description. So yeah, this book starts with kind of going the lead up to the voyage. The crew is assembled. Shackleton is struggling to get money. He had done 2 other voyages down into Antarctica before. One, he almost made it to the South Pole, but had a bail out just before he made it and survived, where the guy he was racing made it to the South Pole, but did not make it back and died halfway back. So go Shackleton for knowing when to quit. I think the first voyage was just kind of sailing around down there just to kind of get a lay of the land and the ice fields and all that stuff. And yeah, so he was struggling to get the money together. And then right when they finally get the money put together, something big happens, the First World War. And then all of a sudden his whole plans went out the window potentially, because he's like, I have one of the nicest ships in the English fleet, and we're about to go take this to the end of the earth, end of the world, and not be a part of this war. And as a British man, he felt he had to contribute, but all of his backers and the royal family said, no, you need to go do this. This is just as important as winning a war. So down they sailed. First they went to South America to kind of do a test run on the ship because it was a brand new ship, never been sailed before, make sure the crew was going to work well together. It was only part of the crew. A lot of the scientists and whatnot had gone on ahead to get the supplies lined up from down in South America and Brazil or Argentina area. Forget where now. And yeah, then they sailed to the South Atlantic and stopped at a whaling facility on, I believe it was South Georgia. Yeah, it was South Georgia, where they partied for like 2 weeks while they waited for the weather to clear up well enough so that they could actually sail out of there, as apparently the whalers often have to do while they wait for to be able to leave port, because that section of ocean is one of the stormiest, roughest oceans in the world. It is one of the hardest seas to sail. And once they set off, they headed down to the continent at the bottom of the planet. You have anything to say, Becky? You're just staring at me here.
Well, you just kept talking, so I didn't know if you wanted me to listen or...
If you want to say something, just cut in.
Well, how did he pick his people? 27 people fills up pretty fast.
Oh, yeah. That was pretty good. He set up an advertisement in the local papers in London, and as people came, he interviewed them, and basically an interview lasted maybe 5 minutes, and if he had a good feeling about you, you were on the crew. till he filled his crew. That was the long and the short of it.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, he did have some requirements, like you had to have been on the ocean before. You couldn't just hop on and brandy new and say, yeah, I want to go sail the ocean blue and this be your first voyage. You had to have some experience.
But what kind of experience? I mean, like, I've been on a cruise and on the ocean.
Yeah, you had to be a sailor.
Okay, there we go.
And then he had positions to fill for scientists because that was part of the funding deal. Is I guess the way that a lot of these things were put together to raise the money, it was often the captains and the guys that actually ran the voyages didn't have any money, so there was all put on credit and people that were willing to back it, but more credit than people willing to back it. So it was to the creditors, it was a book deal because they knew it would be if it was a success, it would be a instant bestseller, and then they'd do a tour, like a talking tour kind of thing, where they go around the country or if not the world and give talks. And that was basically like a guy like Shackleton wasn't planning to actually make any money off of this. He was just hoping to make enough to sustain himself for a couple of years after this voyage kind of thing. And most of it was just more for the glory than anything else.
Well then.
Yeah, good times.
I'm sorry, I can't. Traveling back then must have been nope.
Any other questions?
It makes me feel really uncomfortable to think about their traveling issues. Learning about, even older ships really just is unsettling. Ugh.
Well, this was a special ship. It was state of the art. One of the last ships built this way. It was built in Sweden, I believe, where they handpicked the trees, and it was all hand built. It was all wood, double layered, and it was just one of those, one of a kind ship.
So they left in August from Britain.
Yeah.
When did they get to wherever in South America?
So they left South Georgia December 5th, 1914.
Okay, so it took them 4 months to get from Britain to there.
Yes.
Did it really take 4 months, you think, to ship themselves?
Yeah, they went across to South America, and then they stayed there for a few weeks. When they had a stowaway, a buddy of one of the sailors wanted to jump on this voyage, so he snuck on the ship and basically didn't reveal himself until they were weeks away from South America, and there was no place to get rid of him. So they were forced to try to find a position for him and make do.
Oh, they all probably smelled.
Oh, I'm sure they did. They didn't bathe. But so I said they left South Georgia December 5th, 1914. They enter the pack ice December 11th, 1914. And they start heading due south towards the continent. They actually almost make landfall, but it wasn't where they wanted to make land. So they continued past this point because they were trying to get basically as close to the South Pole as they possibly could to make the journey as short as possible. And they were in the Weddell Sea. And there's a big bay right there, but I think it was more unbeknownst to them, there's a giant ice shelf sticking a few hundred miles out from the continent where they wanted to land.
It's not there now.
It's still kind of there. It hasn't all melted yet, Becky. But within like a day or two after being close to land where they could have made landfall, they get trapped in the ice. And basically they're just sandwiched between two sheets of ice where they had nothing to do except whittle away the time and make sure the ship didn't get crushed.
Too late.
Well, it wasn't crushed yet. They floated for like 4 months.
Oh, foreshadowing. Sorry, yeah. Wrong thing. Foreshadowing.
But yeah, so I forgot to mention they had a bunch of sled dogs because they were going to use sled dogs to get across the country. And they had like 6 or 8 teams, of course. So the dogs are these weren't your typical sled dogs you would recognize now. This is kind of early on when British and Americans are still trying to figure out what the natives already knew. And they're just using pretty much any old dog that can handle the cold and has the energy to pull a sled. So they have all these different breeds, a bunch of mutts, and none of them are trained at all. So on the pack ice, they say, okay, let's get them off the ship because it's like something like 30 dogs. And they make a bunch of igloos for the dogs to live in, and basically they start training the dogs on the ice sheet, thinking that it will eventually float to land because the ice on the ocean is always moving. If you get stuck in the ice, you're not just sitting in one spot. Mm-hmm. So they're taking readings every day, and they're seeing how far they're moving each day, and they're moving west and north. And they're like, okay, hey, if we can get to this one peninsula that's called Graham Land or Lassiter Coast, they'll hop on land there, and Shackleton and the part of the crew that were going to cross with him would go across, and then the rest of the crew would try to get back home. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. So they had another ship go to the other side of the continent. And this was never really talked about after they set sail, like what happened to this ship, and if anything. Because what they were going to do is they're going to meet Shackleton on the other side of the South Pole of Antarctica, and they were going to send out food depots on the path that he would be crossing after he crossed the South Pole. So that the purpose was so they could travel a little bit later and be able to have food caches once they were past the halfway point. So basically, so I don't even know if the ship ever landed or what, but
it just sort of disappears from history.
It just from the story.
But where did it go? Did it make it back?
I'm assuming it did, because it wasn't mentioned that it did its job. After they didn't show up, they said, okay, the guys must have died and left.
Why didn't they have like carrier pigeons?
Because that's not how that works. Remember, this is like the era of the telegram, and they hadn't really wired things up that extensively where there was no people to be worth wiring up to.
Well, I mean, there's nobody usually on the ocean. Even the Titanic had telegram powers.
Yeah, but these guys were literally thousands of miles away from the closest people in the middle of nowhere, as you so eloquently been pointing out earlier.
Oh, I know, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, so they literally spend months just kind of sitting there in the middle, and as basically they realized they had to get through the Antarctic winter, which is our summer up here, but they're below the Arctic Circle, so they're going into a long time of straight night. They're out there running their dog sleds, making sure the pack ice isn't going to crush the ship, and killing as many seals as they can until it gets too cold to go outside, other than for short bits, because they need to supplement their food, essentially. They don't have enough food to make it as long as they might need to make it, so...
Oh my gosh, scurvy!
No, they actually had planned for scurvy. They had enough basically food stuff that they knew would prevent scurvy to last a couple of years if they needed it. Plus, they were eating a lot of blubber, which actually prevents scurvy, I guess. Seal blubber. And it was kind of neat because towards the end they ran out of fuel for their stoves and whatnot.
So they burned the blubber.
They were using the blubber for eating and for running their stove.
Oh my gosh, this smells. Yuck.
Yeah, so they make it through basically winter, and they're in relatively good spirits even. Like there wasn't a lot of fighting, there wasn't a lot of problems. It was the crew got along famously. Like Shackleton couldn't have picked a better crew if he had tried. And they were all hopeful, like, oh yeah, we're going to make landfall any day. We're going to get out of this pack ice as soon as we get back into the Antarctic summer. Well, they get through, and nothing's changed, except that pack ice is starting to shift now, and the ship is being squeezed, and it's being thrust up into the air and tilted side to side in the ice. And this is like, you think when you see something freezing, it's moving, it goes slow, and it would be... No,
it's on the ocean.
Yeah, well, I'm saying like you look at like on a lake, it feels kind of slow. Like, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to...
I've seen those things calve, those icebergs calve. Those things go quick.
Yeah, like seconds. You blink and there's a jagged piece of ice all sticking up where there had been nothing before.
Exactly. So I bet that was like a bucking bronco.
Oh yeah, they got to the point where they had a basically abandoned ship. They got their 3 lifeboats off, and they were just waiting for the ship to sink. They were offloading everything when they felt they could, and just trying to find a stable piece of pack ice. Well, they get everything off, and Shackleton says, we're going to try getting to land, or trying to find open water or something. Comes up with this great plan to build sledges for the boats, the 3 boats he has, and the dogs and the men are going to try to trek across the ocean on the ice pack. And they don't make it very far, because apparently the ice on this ice pack isn't as solid as you would think it is. Guys are sinking up to their waists in random holes of
crevasses. No,
it was more of it would be a snowpack, and they just all of a sudden drop to their waist in water. I mean, the ice is feet thick here, but it's like a wet snow where they're post holing the whole way across. It's like, this isn't like straight up ice like you see on a lake. This is, again, like rotten snow and rotten ice that you could just sink through at any moment.
Helen Thayer talked about that in her book about, it's called Polar Dream. She went to the North Pole and she had sort of like a stick of some kind that was testing the ice.
Yeah, they were doing that too, but again, it was so many, it's 27 guys pulling, in their own harnesses, pulling these boats, plus the dogs pulling the supplies. Yeah, they didn't make it very far. Basically, they got out of sight of the ship. They made it like in 2 weeks. They made it like 20 miles, which again, they're in the middle of nowhere, so that is nothing and doesn't do them any good. Meanwhile, the ice is still moving. The ice is still shifting. Luckily for them, they were still close enough so they find a really good piece of pack ice where they're like, okay, we can sit here, we can ride this out for as long as we need to. But they were close enough they could still get back to the ship with the dogs and get whatever supplies they had left behind because they couldn't carry everything. So whenever the ice would allow them, they would go back and forth to the ship. And they sat there for another few months, just kind of hanging out.
Oh my God.
But this is kind of where kind of mood started.
Women would have figured this shit out. They would have been home already because Brad would need his dinner at 5.
Because you guys never would have left.
I'm going to hurt you with a spoon.
You would have said,
yeah,
we don't need to do this.
Spoons.
You were saying that, these men are stupid for going down there in the first place.
Wait, why? Why would you go?
I'm going to hold back my comments. That will get me killed.
You're welcome to go. Bye.
Anyways, so we're in the Antarctic summer. The seals and the penguins are coming back, so they're killing those as much as they can.
What does penguin taste like, you think?
I don't know. But they were thankful for it because they were getting sick of seal.
Well, I would imagine so. I can't imagine seal actually is that delicious.
And I forget what it's called. It was like
like
elephant seal. Occasionally those would come by and they try to actually hunt the humans down. It was a couple times. It was a very close thing that the guys didn't get maimed and killed.
Don't mess with those fuckers.
Yeah,
they're ugly for a reason.
Mm-hmm. But they like to eat the seals that these guys and the penguins that these guys are eating, and they're like, "Hey, you look kind of penguin-like. I'll eat you instead." And
I bet penguin also tastes like fish.
Probably, you are what you eat. But yeah, so meanwhile, that the reason why they abandoned ship was because basically the ship got crushed, but it was still above the ice. And they're watching it slowly sink beneath the ice as it gets wrecked. It's just being crushed and twisted and torn. That's why I was kind of surprised they were able to find anything, because basically they have pictures in the book, and you look at the ship when it was finally, on its last, when it was finally sinking, and it doesn't look much like a ship anymore. It's just the masts were broken. The bow of the ship is still recognizable, but the rest of it's just bits and pieces.
Well, you didn't do your homework and you didn't check. So obviously you should go and do that.
I'll get right on it.
Because I'm not going to sit here and read an article while you yabber away. But is it bad that I honestly don't care about the men? Like, I'm more intrigued about the ship and the physics of the ship. Because at that time period, like that year, right? In April of 1914, didn't Titanic sink? Or was it 1912? I honestly don't remember.
Do your homework.
I wasn't told to prepare.
But yeah, so basically it said that the ship was crushed, and that's where the ship was crushed was about the halfway point for their floating on the ice at this point.
Nope, I'm done.
So they're going, and actually it's kind of funny. The ship kept getting closer and closer to them. So the ship is abandoned in October 27th, 1915, and then it sinks November 21st, 1915. So they're on the ice, and now as the temperatures are starting to flare, there's a few crew members that aren't pulling their weight, and no matter what the rest of the crew does, these guys don't seem to care. They're living in these tents,
and it's cold.
Well, they never seemed too bothered by the cold, actually.
Well, no, because people back then didn't experience it the way we do, I don't think.
I mean, they were definitely cold, but it was like one of those things that was like this. Yeah, it's just cold out, and on the certain days you can't go out. The big thing, they were always wet.
Nope.
They're always they could never dry out. Their sleeping bags were always wet. They were sleeping basically in puddles of water. It said I think that bothered them more than the cold. I mean, their clothes are literally rotting off their bodies because it's always damp.
And it's salty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Yeah, no. I don't know which is worse, to be cold and wet feeling or hot and wet feeling. Because both of them just, nope. Make it stop.
But yeah, so they eventually get past the Arctic Circle, or Antarctic Circle, I guess. And they're real worried because they're in a part of the Antarctic where they don't know, there's no maps. They kind of know where the land features are. They know where other ships have sank in the area. They know there's food caches on certain islands if they can just get to them. But they're at the whims of the current underneath them and the wind. Because the wind is blowing the ice and the current's pulling the ice. And they're freaking out because if they go the wrong way, it's literally like 2,000 miles to the nearest continent. It's either Africa or South America that they'd have to go to if they miss these islands. Well, on April 9th, 1916, so a whole...
Oh my gosh, World War I is still raging.
Yes.
And they're still down there.
Yeah. No clue what's going on with the rest of the world.
Oh my God. Oh.
They finally take to their 3 boats. And it's basically the every time they try to do anything, basically Shackleton can't make a right call. He's trying to, I get it, he's trying to do something so that, because it's like, we can't just stay here. So they kept moving to different ice packs or different solid pieces of ice for camps, but only be a few over, trying to just maneuver. And eventually they over maneuver and they find an unstable piece of ice that they're trapped on, and their piece of ice slowly gets smaller and smaller as it breaks off and becomes unstable. They've also had to kill all the dogs.
Did they eat the dogs?
Yes. And they were glad for it because it was a change in type of meat.
I bet it was. I wonder if they too tasted like fish there at the end.
Well, no, they had a different food. They had a dog food, which the men had started eating because they were running low on seal, and that's why they started killing the dogs. Like, hey, we got to kill these dogs off. It was kind of sad because a few of them had their own litters, and they had to kill the puppies eventually. They kept the puppies alive as long as they could, because especially a couple of the crew members had fallen absolutely in love with these dogs.
Did they eat the puppies?
I don't think so. I think that basically the last team and the puppies were the beloved dogs, the ones that were the best trained, the best around the people. And I think it sounded like they just kind of took him. One of the guys had to take him out like a couple miles from the rest of the crew, take him behind a sheet of ice so they're out of sight, and shoot them one by one. And I guess it was one of those things where the guy was like in tears with a pistol, hugging the dog, putting the pistol to the dog's head and shooting it, kind of thing.
Okay. So then tell me that they were smart enough. Actually, I think I know the answer to this question. Were they smart enough to take the skin of the dog and make it into things for them?
Oh yeah. They were doing that. They knew they had everything they killed they used, because like I said, their clothes are rotting, their shoes are falling apart because their shoes are basically just leather.
Oh my God. I can't.
And so they're replacing things as they can. Said nothing's going to waste other than the unedible stuff in the bones, which is also attracting the seals and the penguins and the elephant seals and whatnot. But
at this point, is Shackleton still like, we can make it across this continent?
No, at this point they've given up and they're just trying to get off with their lives.
When did he give up?
Basically when he realized they weren't going to make landfall, and they're just waiting for the ice pack to break up, and he has to get everyone home because the Endurance is gone. And basically he realizes out of the 3 ships they have left, the 3 small ships, 2 of them, while seaworthy, are not very good at sailing the sea for any length of distance. And he's got the one ship that's okay. I mean, it's not meant to sail long distances. It's basically a lifeboat, but they can actually sail it. So they finally, the ice pack breaks up enough that they have to get off. They find a couple other ice packs that they basically get stuck onto, and basically they're basically glorified icebergs, and they're constantly in fear of the icebergs rolling on them and basically killing everybody and sinking the ships. So they're constantly battling that. Eventually they get out of the ice pack and they're able to sail. Basically they're at the whim of the wind now, and they're not exactly sure where they are because they're down to their last compass and last sextant. They didn't really go into why they were breaking, but basically it's like
cold.
So I said April 9th, 1916, they take back to the boats and they start sailing, and they head over to Elephant Island. And this was a harrowing journey.
It's not tropical there, is it?
It is not tropical there. It's basically a spit of rock sticking out with a bunch of icebergs and glaciers and ice coming out, and they're battling through storms. They almost lose one of the ships. They effectively do lose it. They lose sight of it. They were never more than a couple miles away, but because the seas were rolling so hard, they never could see each other for like 2 days. One of the ships is so bad that it has to be tied to the Shackleton's better ship and be tugged, and eventually make it to Elephant Island, and there's no place to land. It's just cliffs and ice ringing the thing. So they get to the north side of the island. They find this one little spot. Like, yeah, we can get off our ships here. They battle to get off out of the ocean. Get there. First time these guys have been on land since was a year and a half now, almost 2 years.
Them are some sea legs.
And these guys remember, these guys haven't been sleeping basically since they've been stuck on the ice or had to leave the ship because they're just wet all the time. They stay there for a couple days, but they realize they can't stay there because their little spit of land that they're on, they realize does go under the ocean. The tides do cover up that whole area, and there's no place to go inland because it's just sheer rock. So they have to go back out, keep sailing around the island till they find a piece of land where it does stay dry. There's fresh water, which they're running low on, and they realize that there's a lot of other animals, a few birds that nest there, a lot of penguins nest there, the seals are there, so they're like, okay, good, we can feed ourselves if we have to. Problem is there's like a constant 50-mile-an-hour wind just blowing, and it's literally blowing their landed ships around. They end up having to take the 2 ships that are not as seaworthy or sailing worthy as the one, flipping them over onto a bunch of rocks to make a giant hut where they have their stove that they put in there, and so it's always smoke filled. And at this point, they said that they're out of coal. They're burning seal blubber, and it's just sooty and everything reeks of blubber.
Gosh, that smell.
They can't dry off. The place is constantly letting water in, so it's pretty miserable. The Shackleton, so they're there for a few weeks just trying to recover, and Shackleton says, okay, well, we got to try to get to South Georgia because that's the only way we're going to do it. And so they're going to take the one ship. He handpicks 5 other guys to go with him.
Come with me if you want to live.
And basically it's a dead reckoning, sail 650 miles. Just, so with the one compass, the one sextant. And so he picks the navigator that had basically saved their lives numerous times. Was the guy that actually found them both pieces of land and was able to get in. And yeah, they shore up the ship. They take a ton of the supplies and say, we'll see you in 2 months, we think. We hope.
Nope.
And it's like, if we haven't made it in 6 months, we're dead. Flip one of these ships over, send another 6 guys out, and you guys try it by dead reckoning without the compass and the sextant.
Nope.
Well, I said this is the roughest seas in the world, and they're in this 22-foot boat, and they're making good distance, but they hit, and the weather initially is not the greatest. Shackleton is basically, just like it is what it is. They're ballast. They are constantly having to shift. They're having to constantly bail out water. Again, they're always wet. And the only place they can sleep is on the ballast on sharp, pointy rocks.
My toes hurt every time you say that. Like, I can just,
the
slewing off of skin. Ugh.
The navigator, basically, they're taking shifts, but like in the worst storms, the navigator guy, he's basically the guy that's running it, and he's just holding on for dear life, trying to steer the boat. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. None of them can actually stand up underneath because they put decking over the top. None of them can actually stand up underneath. They're always bent over. They tried doubling up the sleeping bags, and then they found out that they did dry them out a couple times. They had a few good days of weather where they hung them up on the masts and dried them out. But when they dried them out, they realized that those were rotting away, and they were just slow because they were again sealskin at that point, or whatever skin. It might have been, I forget what kind of skins they had, but it was, basically it was just rotting away.
Did they ever give thanks that it was to South Georgia Island that they made it and not like North Sentinel Island, I realize there's two different parts of the ocean. Okay, don't come at me. But still, South Georgia could be like North Sentinel Island. Bad things could have happened.
So we'll do a quick flashback to the guys left on Elephant Island. And again, they literally have nothing to do all day because other than just, fight the boredom.
Nobody brought Monopoly.
They probably would have rotted away by then. I mean, they brought playing cards, and basically those were to the point of unusability because they were they're basically black lumps of ick. Well, one of the guys on the sailing had gone really bad frostbite on his foot, basically, he was a hero because he's one of the guys that helps. When they were doing one of their rowing things, he never stopped rowing, even though he knew his foot was freezing, and they had to amputate the foot. And so luckily, they on this voyage they had 2 surgeons on board, and they had to use a huge amount of blubber to heat their little shack up as warm as they could make it. They had a couple of the officers there to help to be assistants, and basically made everyone else stand outside because they couldn't handle the distraction. They were burning what oil candles they had left to give any light they could. And this book goes into fairly graphic detail about cutting the guy's foot off.
I bet it's amazing.
You would think that, wouldn't you?
I mean, that's actually the most exciting thing since the ship sank.
I mean, luckily they had a little bit of chloroform, so they're able to knock him out for most of it. But that was basically the only anesthesia he got was chloroform.
Why didn't they just put it in the water?
What do you mean?
Because when the water's cold.
They knocked him out with the chloroform.
Yes, but if they didn't have it, or if since they had such a little bit, why not just put the entire leg in the
because
ocean?
They don't want frostbite, and they gotta cut they need limber hands to cut the dead skin and whatnot away and saw through the bone.
I mean, the bone's the worst part, really.
Yeah, it kind of was. They comment on the doctors wrote in their journals how they were impressed that the officers were able to hold up as well as they did on such a gruesome task. But a little spoiler here. That's the only thing that happened. No one died, and that was the only amputation from frostbite.
How'd they close it?
I don't know.
So you're telling me it went into this horrible graphic detail, and then it doesn't tell you how they closed it? That's a letdown.
I'm sure it said something, but it just
Did they cauterize it?
No, they didn't. They didn't have anything to cauterize. They were just kind of. It said a lot of it was already dead. It was going. They were just trying to get rid of the gangrenous cut above that and the clamping and. Maybe they were burning areas, but it's not like they had a. Yeah, they were burning as they were using the stove to get the hot iron going, and
because they would have had to have burned something because you have an artery running in your leg.
Yeah. So they cut his leg off, or at least up to just above the ankle. They had another guy that was basically bedridden who he was a navigator on one of the ships to get to Elephant Island, and he had sat at the wheel for so long that he had essentially a giant knot in his leg, in his butt, and they had to lance that, and it was like a jet stream of pus.
Ew. Dr. Pimple Popper.
But it sounded like it was like the size of like a softball or a football.
She's had those on her show.
Yeah.
Yes, people get weird things in weird spots.
No, this was on his butt. So, yeah. But he had been at the wheel for something like 3 days straight, not moving, trying to get through the storm. Yeah, so back to Shackleton, and they're sailing.
They finally get to the island.
Yeah, they finally get to the island, but. So above all odds, they get there. They sailed pretty much straight to it. But as they get there,
the North Sentinelese people are there waiting.
No, the weather decides to turn against them.
Oh, because it's been so nice.
Yes, it's been too nice for too long. For like 4 or 5 days in a row, it was nice. So now not only do they have a hell of a storm coming in, they got fog. And the few glimpses they caught of South Georgia were basically of cliffs, because most of the island is cliffs. It's just jagged rocks coming out with ice coming down, so that they got to be able to see where they're going, and they keep trying to go in, and they know they're within a few miles of the island. They can't see it, but they can hear the waves breaking on this stuff. The wind is going 100 miles an hour, just blowing them wherever, and they're trying to attack it and do all sorts of crazy things. They go to the island. They had to go away from the island. They're going up and down swells that are something like 80 feet tall, 100 feet tall, and bailing out the ship as they are slowly sinking, because they're just getting swamped. And they do that, I think, again for like 2-3 days. They almost hit the other island that's right next to there, but they're able to use that island to get out of the wind for a brief respite. And eventually the storm passes, and they're finally able to make landfall on the 10th of May, 1916. And the first place they land, they can't actually climb the cliffs, so they got to find another spot. And basically they have to cross some reefs, and they damage the bottom of the ship, so now they're stuck where they are. So they're like, okay, we got to go from here, and they got to hike across the island over a bunch of mountains.
Through the woods to grandmother's house we go.
So now they're pulling apart their ship and getting whatever rope they can get, whatever supplies they can get, that they can carry on their backs to make this land crossing. And they start climbing the mountains and the ice sheets. And it said these are very jagged mountains, and basically the hike up sounds like it wasn't terrible, like it wasn't easy. And these guys have basically they slept there long enough to get some sleep, but they also realize that they're running out of time for their own supplies, and before snow starts coming in, because it's been snowing on them during that storm, so they know winter is coming. And they climb up to the top, realize that they're going in the wrong direction. They're looking at, so they found an easy way down, but the easy way down basically led them to a dead end. So they had to turn around, go back up, find another area, and basically they can't get down. It's like a 100-foot, 200-foot drop, sheer drop. Now they're getting desperate. They're on like day 2, and they can see another storm building in the distance. And they finally find an area, and they realize they can get, it's where they need to go, but they had to drop like 100 feet on a near sheer cliff. And basically they take their wood frame backpacks that they built and use them as sleds to go down on the snowy surface and drop like a quarter of a mile before they were able to stop and go, before they went over another cliff. Eventually, they make it to civilization. So it's a huge thing, because the whaling community is like used to seeing these rugged-looking, scraggly people coming in off the docks, but they'd never seen anyone coming out of the mountains, because that's the only settlement on the island. So it's this big to-do. They realized that there's only like a handful of people that actually knew who they were from when they originally left. The other crews had all gone back home to Norway and Sweden and whatnot, but there's a couple guys that knew them, and it was a joyful reunion. And Shackleton says, yeah, we gotta go back and get the rest of our crew. And that ended up taking several more months and 3 or 4 different attempts before they were able to get back to the crew. And the rest of the crew was getting to the point where they were getting ready to send out another boat, thinking that they're not going to see anybody. Yeah, basically it was they had to do a winter over there again before they got rescued. And it was a mad dash, leaving pretty much everything behind, because they're like, we want none of that. We just want to go home. And they went home as heroes. That's basically the story in a nutshell.
Why heroes?
Because
they survived?
Yeah, they survived, and they
just check.
They went through a very difficult thing and came out for the better of it. You don't
That
think?
is some like Protestant work ethic bullshit that just came out of your mouth. What?
Well,
they went through this horrible experience.
I did grow up in New England, so
they can't be better people because of it. They're hard. They pulled themselves up by their bootstraps.
I do come from a Puritan background there. What?
This all could have been very easily avoided.
Yeah, but then someone else might have done it.
Okay, then let them be stupid.
Well, basically it wasn't until I believe the 50s until someone actually attempted it again and actually succeeded.
Because they finally had the technology and shit.
Oh no, they
had the radar.
Or but they still use
radio.
They still use the dog sleds and all that stuff, because that still was the best thing to use.
Well, yes, but somebody could then find them on a map. They could not be found on a map in the in the teens of the 1900s, whatever. 1900s.
The 20th century.
Early 20th century. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so I was reading this book, and I'm like, man, I really want to talk about this book to somebody. And Becky's like, well, why don't you do a podcast? And I'll be mean to you again.
I really feel like it could be an episode of Dumb Ways to Die.
But none of them died.
I know. I understand. But it still could be an entire episode of Dumb Ways to Die.
Yeah, so it's a good book. You should definitely check it out, Becky.
And then what did the king do? What did King George whatever number do?
I don't know, but they made the money back by doing the tours and doing the book deal and all that stuff. So
they made money off of their pain.
Yeah,
like
Well, I mean, all the sailors were paid anyways because they're salaried. It's the like Shackleton and the captain, all the the top officers, like the top 3 or 4 officers that have to pay for everything. So
We'll
they're
give you $100 for you to relive this experience over and over and over again.
hey, back then $100 was big money.
It's big money now. You can buy a loaf of bread with it. What are you talking about? Don't even get me started about olive oil. It's gone up $2 in a month. I can't. Anyway. Okay.
Oh,
so
I was
then,
listening to a podcast today. They were talking
Stay
about
focused. Stay focused.
talking about tariffs. And last time they mentioned olive oil from Italy for the last time the going up in prices like that.
Oh my gosh. But could you imagine? So you leave and you know that there's this war happening, and then like who wins that battle in the nursing home? Because you know old people are always like, back in my day. Like who's gonna win that? Shackleton's gonna be like,
I think my guess is Shackleton will win that, mostly because the soldiers are going to be like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Where Shackleton's going to be like, let me tell you.
did he really want to talk about it?
Yeah, he loved talking about it.
Okay, then he's just an asshole.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of person that did those things back then, is these adventurers. I mean, it's not like, so listen to some of the podcasts I listen to, like they talk about PTSD in soldiers and saying how a lot of like special forces have lower PTSD rates than your rank and file soldiers. And as someone once pointed out, it's like, hey, you signed up to do the things you did for the special forces. That you're built differently. You're built for that. I signed up because I wanted free college and 4 years of putting off having to be an adult.
So Shackleton was like, I signed up because I'm an asshole?
No, he signed up because the thing he signed up for, he wanted to be there, where a lot of the soldiers, and especially both world wars, were conscripted. They didn't want to be there, or if they weren't conscripted, they were just told, it's like, you have to do it because it's for king and country.
Thinking about those men too, you see an advertisement in the paper that's like, yeah, we're gonna go to Antarctica. Is this really what they signed up for? Did homeboy really sign up to lose his ankle?
No, but again, they went through this hardship together, and they're all,
and then they created a fraternity.
Pretty much,
they're all brothers. With a horrible hazing initiative.
The hazing initiative was surviving the pack ice.
Nope.
And I mean, it's not like the soldiers on World War I are getting gassed and shot up. These guys are literally just sitting there bored most days. Like, okay, we've had the same conversation for the thousandth time.
I wonder then if they had guilt that their peers went to war and instead they ate a lot of blubber.
Yeah, it didn't really sound like that. I didn't get too far into it. I think when they were told by the nobility and the government saying, no, this is also important, we need to do this, it was kind of that, okay, we're still doing something important. And then when they get back, they're like, yeah, well, okay, we weren't in the trench, but we were on the rotten ice.
You were in some sort of other trench.
I mean, basically, they didn't see the color green for a year and a half.
Well, I'm sure they saw it, just probably not in a good way.
Yeah, good point. But again, basically, they're looking at a white oceanscape for months and months and months.
So when do they all get back? Like, when do they all finally they're homeward bound? Chance, Sassy, and Shadow they're coming back. It's like waiting for Shadow right now. Come on, Shadow. Come on, old boy.
Looks like February 10th or 15th.
Of 17?
But yes, I would assume that.
So there's still a whole other year. So did these guys get conscripted?
No, I think they were basically not well enough to go. Because, I mean, you figure these guys have been stranded on living off of blubber for a few years. And
that's a scientific experiment.
Yeah,
right
and then on top of it, like I said, a lot of them are going out giving talks to try to make money and make back the money that they spent on the voyage. Because a lot of them have creditors. So I mean, I said that they're the kind of national heroes in a sense.
There was a female in one of their lives that was like, I told you not to do this. I told you this was going to happen. There's one. There was one female who, after she was so excited that they were back, maybe missing a body part, she was like, I told you.
I think a lot of the officers, the women are like, if we try to keep you here, you're going to gnaw your own arm off because you're bored out of your mind and you need to go do something. These guys are the go-getter types that just want an adventure. They want to go climb the tallest mountain.
They're like, Belle, they want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
Sure.
Instead of being in their poor provincial town.
Pretty much.
Aw, they're Disney princesses.
Wow. Way to put them down there, Becky. Okay. You have any other disparaging comments to make?
Do you know how many times you say basically in a given podcast? You should count it.
Okay.
I could be drunk by now if I was taking
so
shots.
like 3 or 4 times then?
No.
Okay, I will work on my language and filler words.
So now that you've done this, what's the next thing? So, like, I have that weird obsession with Mount Everest. I don't want to go. I do not want to climb that thing at all because it's cold.
I did get a book called The Wager that I've heard is also very good. That's going to be a little ways out before I get to it.
Same time frame or?
Similar time frame.
Different voyage, though?
Different voyage.
So when we found your period of history?
I want to say that.
The age of exploration in the modern times?
I want to say that. I mean, when I read The Terror by Dan Simmons, that was about the 2 ships, the Erebus and the Terror, trying to find the Northwest Passage.
Oh, like that TV show that you made me start watching, and I was like, no, this is not.
Yeah, and that's a historical fiction, but the ships were real and all hands were lost, and that kind of got me interested into these kind of books that I've been slowly kind of picking up. And
so like shipwrecky books?
Yeah, or just these ship adventure books where they're exploring.
It anymore. Oh. But there was it's not fun. Fun's not the right word. An interesting book about it was a cargo ship that went down in the Caribbean because of the mismanagement of communications.
Oh, okay.
It was an interesting book.
Oh. Yeah, I wouldn't mind reading about Shackleton's other adventures and some of these other guys that try to go down to Antarctica or up into the North Pole. Basically where they go someplace cold.
Okay, well, you should check out Helen Thayer's Polar Dreams.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because she went to the North Pole. I don't know. I really don't do the cold,
Except for Everest, apparently.
Yeah, I can't help it. I don't know. There's just something. Maybe it's the bodies.
I think you're just into mountain men.
No.
That's why you married me.
No. You just want to go away.
Okay, well, that's a wrap. That was Endurance by Alfred Lansing. I definitely highly recommend reading this book for anyone that's interested in this sort of stuff. It is definitely worth a read. It's well written. It's a compelling story. It's just awesome.
If you've made it this far, you have endurance.
You have some grit.
Oh my gosh. Please stop.
Why?
Because you just sound like a really bad TED Talk right now.
You're welcome.
Or maybe the Secretary of Education in her A1 technology.
You're welcome. So if you found this podcast interesting, we do post on the 5th and 20th of every month. The 5th is our Alex and I's book pick of the month. The 20th is a bonus episode. Alex is busy with working many, many jobs, and I have started up a master's program. So the bonus episodes might become true bonus episodes sooner than later, but we will let you know when we're going to be skipping a few of those. Alex, as I mentioned earlier, Alex has some books for sale on Amazon.
Buy them.
Yeah, buy them. Give him some money.
Make him relevant in his lifetime.
Those will be in the description down below. The Destroyer and Paul Plimpton versus Ragnarok. Let's see. We have an Instagram at kendallbookworms. Come check us out there. I have a link tree linked on there so you can find all of our different social media stuff. Facebook, YouTube, audio only. We're on all the major podcast apps. Tell all your friends and family and whoever about us to listen if you think they'll find us interesting. And if you're on Spotify or Apple, rate and comment because that'll help us in the algorithms, supposedly.
Ooh, for one of your quiz thingies, you should see if people want you and Alex to do one of the TikTok famous dances, and then you could have a TikTok.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a TikTok, so I refuse.
Besides the point.
If you want to follow us on Goodreads, the links are on the link tree for me and Alex. I also am writing book reviews for other books that I read that aren't put on the podcast. So if you want to check those out, those are on Goodreads, Medium, or Substack, whichever one you prefer. Not charging for anything like that. So to go check out what I'm writing, and maybe if I get the courage, or maybe I'll post one of my short stories I've written.
You could put one of your papers up there.
Oh, I could put one of my papers up there. That would be just boring and horrible.
You never know.
Yeah, so I think that's all, Becky. Have I covered it all, you think?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Gmail? Did you talk about the Gmail?
Oh, I have it. If you want to email us directly, you can do that through Instagram in the DMs, or we have a email, kendallbookworms@gmail.com.
And don't you have to do the Podbean? You haven't talked about Podbean.
We are hosted by Podbean.
Like, that's a thing you have to do, isn't it?
Is it? No.
I don't know.
I pay them. I don't have to.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the rules. I just sit here and you're like, talk. Like, okay, I can do that.
Okay. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Until next time, I'm Joe.
Becky?
See you later.
Bye, worms.